Hello and welcome to Leonard's Language Lessons. This is writing lesson number 7. Our learning targets for today are I can, recall terms, facts, and rules associated with essays, and I can list the parts of an essay in the correct order. So to start off with, I'd like for you to think about the parts of our language, and I want you to think from the smallest unit to the largest unit, because we have to master the small units so that we can move on to the largest unit. So think about it, what they are, and list them with me, if you can, in order. Our smallest unit of our language is going to be words. Yes, of course, we have letters and we have sounds that make up words. We basically have to know our words, and we have to have our knowledge of our parts of speech in order to use those correctly. Then you put all your words together into phrases, and these phrases are groups of words that work together as a unit to express meaning or to function in certain ways. Then a little bit bigger than that, we have clauses, which is basically a group of words but usually has a subject or a verb. Then a specific type of a clause is an independent clause, and that's going to be a subject, verb, and it makes sense standing alone, so that's going to be a sentence. Then we put sentences together that are on the same topic or main idea or central idea. Those are going to create paragraphs. And then we put paragraphs together that are on the same main idea, then those become writing pieces. So we've kind of progressed throughout this sequence, throughout our learning this year, and so now we're going to delve into a larger part of our language, which is going to be to create writing pieces. So my question to you is, what would you say is one of the most common writing pieces? Well, that would be an essay. And so I always like to teach the format of an essay because I feel like you can use the format of an essay for pretty much any kind of writing assignment that you do because the format can apply to these other types. Even later or in other classes or later in your education, when your teachers ask you to write a paper, in essence what they're asking you to write is an essay. So I want you to think about this. How many paragraphs does an essay usually contain, or would be a good amount? Should an essay contain? We'll use this little picture here. Mario and Luigi are giving each other a high five. So our ideal amount is going to be 5. Now think about this. Is it acceptable for there to be more? And is it acceptable for there to be fewer? So let's think about that for a little bit. It is acceptable for there to be fewer or more, but you really have to just kind of think situationally. You definitely, 1 or 2 is probably too little. 3 would be the minimum amount because then you only have 1 body paragraph. 4 I'm actually okay with if you're struggling with getting a solid idea for a 5th paragraph, or if you're taking like the on-demand test or some other assignment or a assessment where you're timed and you don't have a lot of time, then I think 4 is okay. So 4 or 5 is kind of ideal. You can have more, like sometimes you might have a longer paper that has more pages or a certain requirement, but you want to make sure you don't put too many that you're losing the attention of your audience. So again, 5 is kind of a standard amount. 4 or 5 is usually acceptable. So surprise, surprise, I have another mnemonic device for you, and it has to do with food. What is a mnemonic device that can help a writer remember the format of an essay? Well, think about this. An essay is like a 3-course meal. So how is an essay like a 3-course meal? Well, the introduction is going to be like an appetizer. If you think about it, that's the first thing that you eat. It gets your appetite going. It makes you hungry for more. It kind of gives the reader a little taste of what is to come. Then the body is like the main course, or the entree. The main course is usually going to have a main dish, usually like a meat, or the kind of the main attraction. That's why you're eating the meal, is because of that main dish. So that's kind of like, in essence, like your strongest point in your body. And then you've got these other ideas, which would be like your sides of your meal. And then even kind of, if you think about your last body paragraph, would kind of be like a drink to wash it all down. So that's your main course, including your main dish, sides, possibly your drink. And then lastly, one of my favorite parts is that the conclusion is going to be like the dessert. So think about it. You're not done eating. You're hungry for a little bit more. It makes the meal feel complete, and it even gives the reader, hopefully, leaves them with a sweet taste in their mouth. So again, thinking about this concept of a 3-course meal, we want to make sure that we satisfy our reader's hunger with our writing. So again, this is just a visual representation of what we just went over. Of course, the introduction is kind of like the appetizer there. The body, of course, like the little dish that they bring out that you take the top off and it presents the main meal. And then, of course, our conclusion is like our dessert. So this past section that we just covered was talking about just essays in general. Now we're going to get specific into the introduction. So our learning targets for our introduction section will be: I can recall the terms, facts, and rules associated with an introduction. I can list the parts of an introduction in the correct order. So if I were to ask which paragraph presents the topic or the main idea or the main ideas of an essay, we would hopefully know that that is the introduction. And again, we said that was like the appetizer. Now, it's really important for that introduction to be strong, because think about your goal. You want the audience to want to continue to read your piece. If your first sentence or sentences or your entire paragraph is boring, that kind of sets the tone for the essay. It makes the reader think that the rest of the essay is also going to be boring. So here's your introduction format. We're going to begin with a hook. To go with that, we're going to have something called the explanation. We'll begin that with a transition. Then we'll have what's called the refer to prompt. And then we'll finish up with the thesis statement. So again, I feel like the students at this point in time, you should know the question and the answer here. Which term is like a catchy way to grab the reader's attention? That's called the hook. There are tons of hooks that you can use. There are about 6 or 7 here that I feel like are very commonly used and that any student could use to get the reader's attention. And just list them here: quote, question, dialogue, fact or statistic, paint a picture, and general statement. Of course, quote usually would require some internet research. If you do ask a question, make sure that it's not one of the overly used questions. For example, what is your favorite candy? Mine is blank. Or do you like candy? Well, I do. Those are just overused. Dialogue, of course, if you use that, that's someone talking or people having a conversation. A fact or a statistic. A fact, of course, would be something that you could look up. A statistic would be a fact that has numbers in it, sometimes percentages. A paint a picture is going to be a really detailed statement that appeals to the reader's 5 senses. And then there's general statement, which is just kind of basically a statement about the subject. I would say that's probably the least effective of the hooks, but it's still better than saying, "Hi, my name is," at the very beginning of your essay. When you do use a question, again, try to avoid those overused questions, but there are sometimes you can ask like a really good question that gets the reader's attention. So these are some really good hooks. There is also an additional list to consider. A dictionary definition would basically be looking up your word in the dictionary and providing the definition. If you want to, you could include the part of speech and pronunciation too if you like. The source entry would be similar, except you would list synonyms for whatever word you're focusing on. An anecdote would be a little short story about your topic. Emphatic fragments would be using incomplete sentences on purpose. Paradox may be a little bit more advanced for this grade level, but it's basically a statement that seems to contradict itself. A joke, of course, everybody knows what a joke is. You kind of maybe ask a question or, paint a picture, give a scenario, and then you have, kind of like a funny punchline at the end. If you use jokes, please make sure that they make sense and are funny. I sometimes have students that want to use a joke, but it doesn't always do one of those, so I say don't force the joke. A riddle is really fun. You give a description, in-depth description of something, and at the end you say, who am I or what am I, and have the reader guess. A slogan would be used kind of like a catchy saying or expression used for a particular product. An advertisement, of course, would be either like something that you would see on a billboard or in a magazine or on a commercial or something kind of like that for a particular product. Again, you could use one existing or kind of make up your own. A jingle is basically kind of like a little song that is set to music and it makes it memorable, whatever word you're trying to use. A rap, you could use one in existence. You can make up your own. Song lyrics, just make sure you don't use the whole song. Use the particular part of the song that coordinates with your topic. Poem, you could actually create your own or use another one. Just probably want to make it kind of short. The next two on the list kind of have it's a bigger umbrella term that has things underneath it. Figurative language would be, of course, be language that's not meant to be taken seriously. It has an alternate meaning. Those would include similes, metaphors, hyperboles, and idioms. And then descriptive language is going to be language that appeals to one of the five senses or maybe a variety of those. And that would be rhyme, alliteration, onomatopoeia, or personification. These are just a few of the hooks. In fact, I've probably mentioned before, I have one time I set out to create a list of hooks from A to Z, and I have at least one for all of the letters of the alphabet, even the tricky ones, and I have those in class. And I would be glad to illustrate those for you at any time. I would just say with hooks, again, you're trying to get the reader's attention. Try to go outside your comfort zone and step outside of the box and just try to think of something that no one else would come up with. You definitely don't want a hook that your other classmates or other people would come up with, because then it's not unique and attention-getting. All right, after our hook, we want to explain our hook. But before we get there, sometimes it's good to kind of help our sentence fluency to flow from one part to another, to use a transition. So a transition is going to be a word, a phrase, or possibly a clause that helps writing flow from one part to another. Just a little visual there is kind of the arrows to help us kind of connect from one part to another. Some really, I would say, go-to transitions that you can use throughout a writing piece would be clearly, basically, obviously, as one can see or as one can tell, as one might guess, as one might infer, or as one might find, or as one might discover. These transitions will get you to your explanation, which go hand in hand with your hook. So with your explanation. The hook and the explanation go hand in hand. A statement that makes something clear by providing reason or elaboration, that's what we're going for. So when you use your hook, it may not be clear to the reader why you use that or how that kind of coordinates with the topic. So this would be the time where you would explain. So here are a few ways to explain the hook. You can tell what it is, what it means, how it relates to the subject, how it relates to the audience, or how it relates to the writer. You can do something else that's kind of similar to this, or kind of a variety of these things. I think the thing with an explanation is you kind of just need to think there's not one way to do it. It's different because everyone's hooks are usually different, and so you just kind of have to look at it as a situation by situation process. And then also, just try not to say something like, like really basic, like for example, if you're writing about your favorite candy and you do a hook, you don't want to come out and go ahead and say your thesis statement as your explanation, because you got to save that for the end of your paragraph. So you wouldn't say, clearly my favorite candy is blank, because you want to save that for the very end. So you have to be kind of crafty with your explanation. So sometimes that's on a situation by situation basis. Our next item in the introduction is going to be the refer to prompt. This is a reference to the most important sentence or sentences of the writing prompt. To locate the most important part, basically you need to identify the subject. Oftentimes, what I mean by that is kind of what is the issue. Sometimes it's the topics and the background information that kind of led to why this writing assignment is being written. One little tip that should be helpful, when you're doing an on-demand writing prompt, and the prompt is usually divided into two sections, one of them is called the writing situation. Usually you can identify the most important part. It's usually located in the writing situation. Often it's going to be one or two sentences that are located there. One easy thing to do when you're referring to the prompt is just to basically reword or restate the sentence or sentences that are there. And of course, an easy way to do that is you can, add or lengthen, you shorten, you can combine, you can rearrange. Just make sure that you try to avoid stating what is there. Now, if you really are just strapped for a way to think of a different way to say it, it could be acceptable to repeat it. Basically, you just want to let the reader know why you are writing the assignment. The most important part of our introduction comes last, and that's called the thesis statement. A thesis statement is basically a sentence. Sometimes it could be multiple sentences, but basically a sentence that presents the main idea or main ideas of the essay. One thing to think about with a thesis statement, like I said, it's the most important sentence of the entire essay, and kind of the rationale behind that is the thesis statement is like a topic sentence for an entire essay. It's located at the end of the introduction because it acts as a preview for the rest of the essay. Basically, hey, I'm about to let you know about this topic or talk about these ideas in the body, and that's why it's located there at the very end. Our next section is the body section, and our learning targets for this section are: I can recall the terms, facts, and rules associated with the body paragraphs, and I can list the parts of a body paragraph in the correct order. So basically, the body is going to be the paragraphs that support the main idea or main ideas of an essay. So that's going to be like your main course. How many body paragraphs are usually in an essay, or rather should be in an essay? Well, that number is 3. Again, think back to that question that we asked about, is it okay for there to be fewer than 5 paragraphs in an overall essay, or more than 5? Yes, it is okay to possibly have a fewer or more, but 3 is kind of your average amount for body. You could possibly have, 2 if you can't think of a really good third idea. You probably wouldn't want to go any fewer than that because one paragraph body is really not fully developed enough. But you could do more. You just don't want to put so much in there that you're losing the reader's attention. So I have another mnemonic device for you, of course. So what is that mnemonic device that can help a reader remember the format of a body paragraph? This is one that you already know. It's the same mnemonic device that can help you remember the format of just a regular paragraph. And so what is it? It's a paragraph is like a cheeseburger. So how is a paragraph like a cheeseburger? Well, think about the format. The top bun is going to be like the topic sentence. Only change here is we're going to add a little transition in front of it. I kind of think of like sometimes when you go someplace and they have a sandwich or a burger of sorts, and they'll put a little toothpick in it, and on top of the toothpick they'll put like a little dill pickle or an olive or something like that. That transition can be on top of our little toothpick in our cheeseburger. Then moving on, the meat, the cheese, the vegetables like your tomato, lettuce, onions, pickles, your condiments like mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, even seasonings. Those are going to be like your support sentences. And then your hamburger would fall apart without that bottom bun, which is going to be your conclusion sentence. So now I've got another mnemonic device, back-to-back mnemonic devices. What is a mnemonic device that can help a writer remember how to begin a body paragraph, and what does it stand for? So remember when you're writing You want to get the reader's attention. And in this particular case, you want to start off your paragraphs with a bang. So what is our mnemonic device? It is TNT. So what does TNT stand for? It stands for transition and topic sentence. So let's break that down. A transition that's a word that's come up, and it will continue to come up because transitions really help with our sentence fluency. And that's going to be a word, a phrase, or a clause that helps writing flow from one part to another. Again, you've got these two arrows because they're basically connecting one part to another. Now, when you use transitions, some transitions that I would say are a little bit overused would be first of all, second, secondly, second of all, third, thirdly, or third of all. Those would be okay, again, if you just can't think of anything else, but really there are some better options. So for a first body paragraph, let's try some of these. First off, first and foremost, first things first, in the first place, of the first order, at first, early on, to begin, to start off. For starters, to embark, for the opening act, to get things started, to kick things off, in the beginning, at the onset, to commence, initially, most importantly, without further ado. Now moving on to your second body paragraph, you've got second off, second yet still substantial, next things next, in the second place, of the second order, to continue, in continuation, to proceed, to persist, to persevere, to press on. Next, also, additionally, in addition, to add, furthermore, moreover, and equally important. Now, for a third body paragraph, or possibly your last body paragraph, you might start off with one of these. Third off, in the third place, of the third order. Last but not least, last but certainly not least, last but definitely not least, saving the best for last, best things last. Finally, to finalize for the grand finale. Next, also, additionally, in addition, to add, furthermore, moreover, equally important. So our topic sentence, remember, is going to be that sentence that states or introduces the main idea of the paragraph. And again, that topic sentence is going to have like a main idea or a central idea, and that's going to guide your paragraph and let the reader know, hey, I'm going to talk about this without saying, I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to be writing about. So the topic sentence, as I said, should let the audience know what the topic of the paragraph will be. However, try to avoid doing so in such a boring or predictable manner. Try to state the topic in a sophisticated way. So you want to basically make sure that you're avoiding poor topic sentences. Number one pet peeve would be, I'm going to tell you about blank. Another one, I'm going to tell you why or how. There are many reasons why. The first reason, blah-de-da, or the first reason why, I think. Or my first, second, or third reason is. These are overused topic sentences, and because they are, we want to try to avoid those wordings. So then after our topic sentence, we want to make sure to support our main idea with support sentences. And these are going to be the sentences that support the main idea of the paragraph. So think, at least how many support sentences should be in a body paragraph? It's the same concept of how many body paragraphs should be in an essay. So the answer is 3. Now again, could there be fewer? Could there be more? Potentially, but if you get any fewer, you're not going to be as detailed as you like. And if you get too many, then you might lose your reader's attention. So my suggestion when you're writing support sentences, and you want to write at least 2 sentences for each of your supporting ideas. So easiest way to do that is to write 1 support sentence for each of your supporting ideas, and then to provide an additional detail sentence or sentences to fully develop the topic. Now, of course, we have another mnemonic device, and it does go with our last mnemonic device, or actually not our last one, but the one before that, about a paragraph is like a cheeseburger. We'll think about what goes with cheeseburger, and that's going to get us to our next one. What is a mnemonic device that can help a writer remember the different types of support sentences, and what does it stand for? What goes with cheeseburger? Fries! So what does fries stand for? That's going to be facts, reasons, interviews, examples, and sensory details. Now, there are other types of support sentences, even more than the ones I'm going to list, but some other ones that you might incorporate into your paragraphs to make sure that they are fully detailed would be quotes, questions, definitions, and anecdotes. Now, as you're writing your support sentences, you want to make sure that you use transitions in your support sentences to clarify relationships among ideas and concepts. Again, the purpose of transitions is to help with sentence fluency. So yes, you can use transitions like first, next, last. Those are fine. But here are some definite ones that might help you. If you want to provide an example, you can use different transitions like for example, for instance, to illustrate. I sometimes feel like students overuse for example, so those are two other options for you. If you want to add to something you're saying, instead of using like a comma and the conjunction and all the time, you can use additionally, in addition, or also. If you want to emphasize something to make it stand out more or kind of prove your point further, you can say again, indeed, emphatically. If you want to make a comparison, you can say words like similarly, likewise, or in the same way. Contrast, to show a difference, would be to contrast, in opposition, on the contrary, on the other hand. And cause and effect transitions could be as a result, consequently, thus. So as you're writing your support sentences, you want to make sure that they flow by adding in these transitions at the beginning. Now, as we're moving along, it's suggested that when you write your conclusion sentence, you want to begin with a transition. So again, we want to try to go away from those overused transitions, particularly the conclusion transitions. Everyone likes to use in conclusion, so let's avoid those. So what are some better alternatives? Well, here are some options for you. You can put clearly, basically, obviously, as one can see, as one can tell, as one might guess, as one might infer, as one might have found, as one might have discovered, in case the person were unaware. These next ones would be called emphasis transitions. Again, indeed, certainly, definitely, absolutely, positively, emphatically, evidently, notably, undeniably, unquestionably, beyond question, without a doubt. And then there's in fact, in reality, or in any case. And then as we're writing our transition, then we have to wrap up with our conclusion sentence or sentences, something you might want to consider. Did you know that it's okay to write an additional sentence to wrap up your paragraph? Absolutely. So this is going to be your sentence or sentences that restate or summarize the main idea or ideas of a paragraph. So a little way to remember conclusion sentence is that a conclusion sentence or the sentences are going to wrap up the paragraph. So I always think of the picture of a present, and you wrap it up and you make the paragraph finished, nice, neat, and presentable to the reader. Now, there are two basic options for the conclusion sentence or possibly sentences. Number one is the easiest way, is that you look at your original topic sentence and you reword it. So again, any phrases that you might have used, you want to try to avoid using those. You can use synonyms, you can do different wordings, you can rearrange, add in some different descriptive words like adjectives. You reword the topic sentence. Your second option is not really difficult, and I think students don't use this as many times, but it's really easy. It's to summarize your main idea or ideas from the paragraph. You can look back in your paragraph for this, or you can look at your pre-writing plan. If you'll just look at what you wrote down as support and you kind of put those in list order, that's a really easy way to conclude your paragraph. Now, we definitely want to avoid poor conclusion sentences. You don't want to say things like this or that is why. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. These are my reasons why. It's kind of similar. Now you know. I hope you liked my paragraph, or goodbye, have a nice day. These are overused and elementary, and we want to try to avoid them. So now we should have known all the information we need to know about body paragraphs. So hopefully we've accomplished these goals. I can. recall the terms, facts, and rules associated with body paragraphs, and I can list the parts of a body paragraph in the correct order. And now for our final section is going to be our conclusion section. We want to accomplish these learning targets. I can recall the terms, facts, and rules associated with a conclusion, and I can list the parts of a conclusion in the correct order. So which paragraph summarizes the main idea or ideas of an essay? That's going to be the conclusion. Again, remember, it's kind of like the dessert in your 3-course meal. So one question I always like to ask students is, have you ever written an essay or a writing piece, and when you get to the conclusion, you feel like you've run out of things to say, or you feel like you are repeating yourself? And most students will say yes. I feel like sometimes writers, particularly students, don't know what to write in the conclusion. They feel like they've run out of things to say, and they don't want to say the same thing over again. And so it's really easy for them to do 2 things. One, write a really short conclusion, or say the same thing again. So as you're writing, please try to avoid writing only a sentence or 2 and try to avoid being repetitive. So in order to avoid that, I'm going to teach you a format that hopefully if you put those things in your conclusion paragraph, you won't be coming up short or feeling like you don't know what to put. So here's one last mnemonic device for you for this particular lesson. What mnemonic device can help a writer remember the formats of an introduction and a conclusion? Okay, mirror, mirror on the wall. All right, now, I say that's not your mnemonic device, but I think of that quote from the well-known movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I want you to think about this. The introduction and the conclusion are going to do similar things, but we don't want it to make it exactly the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this mnemonic device. The conclusion is a mirror image of the introduction, or kind of to expand that. The format of a conclusion is a mirror image of the introduction. So if you think about it, when you look into a mirror, the reflection that's in the mirror is not exactly the same as who or what is looking in the mirror. It's a flipped version. So if you'll think about it, in the introduction, the hook and the explanation came first, the refer to prompt came in the middle, and the thesis statement came at the end. So now let's flip that. Our conclusion format is going to begin with restating our thesis, beginning with a transition. We're going to keep the refer to prompt in the middle, and then we're going to end with what's called the refer to hook. So again, if you think about it, that format of the introduction, we've taken it and we've flipped it. So we're going to begin our conclusion by restating our thesis, and we want to start with that with a conclusion transition. So again, a transition is going to be a word, phrase, or clause that helps writing flow from one part to another, and we want to try to avoid those overused transitions like in conclusion. So some better options for you. Again, these are going to be a little bit different than those conclusion transitions that we would use to close a paragraph. These are going to signal to the reader that we are closing our entire essay. So here's some options for you. To close, in the end, overall, all in all, on the whole. To summarize, in summary, in summation, to sum it up. To summarize the aforementioned ideas, points, or information. To top it off, to wrap things up, in brief, in a word, in a nutshell, in hindsight, in retrospect, which mean looking back, to cross the finish line, to wave the checkered flag, to place the cherry on top for the grand finale. So after we have our transition, now we need to restate our thesis. And so I have kind of shortened this. Instead of saying restate thesis statement, I just shorten it and call it the restate thesis. So what is it? It's a rewording of the sentence that presents the main idea or ideas of the essay. Now, we want to make sure that we avoid the original wording. So if you used a certain word or phrase in the original thesis, you want to try to change it up at this point in time. Also, something that I feel is helpful, try to restate your thesis in 2 or more sentences. Reason for that is if you just restate your thesis in 1 sentence, then your conclusion might be a little on the shorter side. And again, we want 4 or 5 sentences in our conclusion. So there are a few options for the restate thesis. Option number 1 is going to be to reword the original thesis, and that would just be in 1 sentence. Again, we're avoiding the same wording as before. And then a second sentence or additional sentences would be to add an additional detail sentence or sentences. And that, again, might provide detail or elaboration to further your point. One of those options could be to mention your ideas. If you want to look in your pre-writing plan and look at your ideas 1, 2, and possibly 3, and you want to put those, you can just put them in a listing order. That's one option for your additional detail sentence or sentences. Another option is to summarize your main ideas. So again, look at your pre-writing plan. You probably had 1, 2, maybe 3 ideas, and you're going to take each of those ideas and turn them into their own individual sentence. The next part of the conclusion is going to be the refer to prompt, and that's going to be a rewording of the most important part of the writing prompt. So again, avoid the original wording if possible, whether it was in the original prompt or the way that you chose to reword it in your introduction. And just think, anytime that you're trying to reword something, you have some basic options. You can add to it. You can delete part of it, which, to expand or to shorten. You can combine, like if you have 2 sentences, you can combine them into 1. You can rearrange the order of the sentence. There are a variety of options for you. And the last part of your essay is going to be the refer to hook. Basically, this is where you change or alter the catchy sentence or sentences that began the essay, and you kind of use them again here at the end. Your goal is to try to end the essay in a catchy or memorable way, and you want to make the essay feel complete. Some ways, again, to alter the hook is, you can kind of add to it. You can delete, shorten, combine, rearrange. So again, you wouldn't want to just repeat what you said, but you want to refer back to it in some way that's creative and makes the essay feel complete. Sometimes students struggle with this because, again, there's not just one right way to do it that I can give you directions and say, do this. It requires a little bit of creativity. So again, your goal is you want to end in a catchy way and make the essay feel complete. So there are a few different options for your refer to hook. Number 1, I kind of already talked about, is to change up your original sentence or sentences that you began the essay with. Again, shortening usually is the key, but any other combination of these ways, adding, deleting, combining, or rearranging. Another option, but I'm not always a big fan of this because it almost seems like sometimes out of the blue, but sometimes you can make it work, is to maybe use another effective hook that kind of goes with your topic and just got to make sure that it coordinates. These are 2 basic options. Again, usually I suggest students do number 1. Now, there are a few other options for the refer to hook, and it depends on what type of essay that you're writing. For example, if you're writing an argumentative essay, you could use a call to action. You could actually do, if you wanted to, you could do a refer to the hook and a call to action, or either or. But a call to action is kind of basically where you suggest that the reader do a certain action, and you tell them specifically what you'd like them to do. If you're writing a narrative essay and you're writing about something that you experienced or that someone experienced, you can kind of provide a lesson or theme to tell what you or another person learned in the story. So that concludes our conclusion section. Hopefully we can say we have accomplished these learning targets. I can recall the terms, facts, and rules associated with the conclusion, and I can list the parts of the conclusion or a conclusion in the correct order. So now we want to make sure, again, to wrap up our essay lesson, that we can recall any terms, facts, and rules associated with essays. And as we got into that, of course, we divided it into the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. We want to make sure that we can list the parts of an essay in the correct order. Again, we want to know that there are 3 parts of an essay: introduction, body, conclusion. If I were to say, list the parts of the introduction in the specific order that I've taught you, hopefully you should be able to put those in the correct order. And same thing with the body, and same thing with the conclusion. We should be able to put everything where it needs to go. So now that we have this, foundational knowledge, whenever we go to write an essay, if we can follow these steps, then we definitely know that we can have an organized writing piece. And again, like I said, if you know this format for an essay, you can use it with basically any writing assignment that you do. You can apply this same format of an essay. So again, I hope today, as we learned all the things that have to do with essays and writing lesson number 7, you can use this year and beyond as you write writing pieces such as essays. Thank you for your listening and attention.